In the flood of promotional marketing leading up to the premiere of Amazon Prime's The Rings of Power series, fans got to hear a lot from the showrunners J.D. Payne and Patrick McKay regarding their approach to this show. There have been several questionable remarks from Payne and McKay as they have revealed the limited rights they hold to J.R.R. Tolkien's Second Age stories and the creative liberties they have taken to supplement their show. I've noticed in various interviews the frequent use of the term Tolkienian in attempting to describe their approach to creating original content within this supposed Middle-earth series. Their usage of the term has continued to puzzle me, and so in this video I thought I'd examine what it truly means to be Tolkienian, the different interpretations that have been associated with it, and why I believe that this new Amazon Rings of Power show does not fit that description. First, let's begin with the Rings of Power showrunners J.D. Payne and Patrick McKay and one of their first uses of the word Tolkienian. In a couple of exclusive interviews with Vanity Fair, the showrunners finally began to address fans' burning questions regarding the series. After revealing they have rights solely to The Hobbit, The Lord of the Rings trilogy, and its appendices, they revealed their approach to creating a Second Age series within the limited scope of these rights, saying, quote, "There's a version of everything we need for the Second Age in the books we have the rights to. We took all these little clues and thought of them as stars in the sky that we then connected to write the novel that Tolkien never wrote about the Second Age. We worked in conjunction with world-renowned Tolkien scholars and the Tolkien estate to make sure that the ways we connected the dots were Tolkienian and gelled with the experts and the estate's understanding of the material." In a previous interview with Vanity Fair, the showrunners did confirm that there would be a significant time compression of the Second Age, with their intention being to tell the story of all the major events of this era within a single point in time. From what was then revealed about the characters featured in this series, it's also evident that these events will not only be compressed, but rearranged from their original sequential order as well. As they attempt to connect these events, the showrunners explained that they worked in conjunction with Tolkien scholars and the Tolkien estate to make sure that how they connected these story dots are Tolkienian. So here, their use of the word is connected with the various Tolkien scholars and the estate and their approval based upon their own understanding of the source material. If they thought what the showrunners were doing, quote, gelled with their own understanding of Tolkien's work, then their feedback and approval is what makes this series Tolkienian, according to Payne and McKay. I admit that while this sounds good that the people with supposedly the most knowledge of Middle-earth were consulting with the showrunners to make sure it stayed true to the spirit of Tolkien's written works, it depends too much on someone else's interpretation of the author's mythos, their opinion on the themes and lore of Tolkien, rather than having the source material itself speak as the ultimate authority. Other occasions where the production staff marched out the word Tolkienian would be at the San Diego Comic-Con panel with the showrunners and cast.
There are characters, played by actors who will be out here in just a moment, who are not canonical to Tolkien. Okay, and that must be one of the greatest challenges. How do you fill out that world with characters that are implied, they're implied cultures that you're drawing from, but they're not necessarily described to the depth that you're going to represent them. What guidance did you take for those characters' creations?
One, always back to Tolkien, and two, when Tolkien was silent, we tried to invent as Tolkienian a way as possible. Go back to the book, go back to the book, go back to the book.
This time, when speaking on their approach to their non-canonical editions, the showrunners cited Tolkien as their guide, and when his works were silent on a matter, they then said their aim was to invent as Tolkienian a way as possible. McKay also chimed in here with the phrase, "Go back to the book, go back to the book, go back to the book." Their usage of the word in this context is dependent very much on their own interpretation, their own understanding of what makes a storyline fundamentally Tolkien. While their remarks here sound like their aim is to stay true to the author's story, especially with McKay's emphasis on going back to the book, their other statements regarding the many creative liberties they have taken with the source material say otherwise. It would be entirely too long of a video for me to bring out the numerous changes that have already been made with Second Age characters, from the decision to turn Galadriel into a brash and angry warrior to the invention of Isildur's previously non-existent sister. And the list of these changes are also sure to grow as the story unfolds and winds through subsequent seasons. But what was especially revealing was the showrunners' decision to include hobbits in their series, and to give them a significant contribution to Second Age events. Payne and McKay's attempt at an explanation for this choice demonstrated a willful disregard of Tolkien's writings concerning hobbits, merely to satisfy their own interpretation of what makes a story Tolkienian. The primary issue with the inclusion of a hobbit storyline in the Second Age is that Tolkien very specifically in numerous places noted that these beings did not have a significant part to play in the history of Middle-earth until the Third Age, as detailed in The Hobbit and The Lord of the Rings books. To justify the invention of a Hobbit story in their show, Payne pushed back and said it's not technically a Hobbit story, that it's a Harfoot story. This statement falls apart almost as fast as Payne could say it, as Tolkien was not silent on this matter. In fact, you don't even have to dig that deep into the lore to completely demolish the idea that these could be separated, as the showrunners are attempting to do. In the prologue of Tolkien's Fellowship of the Ring, it is clearly stated, with no other room for interpretations, that Harfoots, along with Fallowhides and Stores, are 3 breeds of hobbit. However, it is what McKay adds to this answer that really gives us some insight into what makes their show Tolkienian in their eyes.
It was really important to us from minute one that what makes Tolkien's tone unique and special is the blend of all of these cultures and what each of them bring to Middle-earth and what each of them represent. The underdogs and the smallest people being able to do great deeds. We could not imagine a version of this show that didn't have a version of that in some form.
So here we see that even when Tolkien spoke through his writings, in the end, it didn't matter to Payne and McKay. To me, this proves that Amazon's Rings of Power isn't about Tolkien. It's about the showrunners and what they want. They wanted hobbits in their show regardless of what Tolkien wrote. They also said they didn't want to do a side thing or a spin-off or the origin story of something else. They instead wanted to find a, quote, huge Tolkienian mega-epic. They use the term Tolkienian here to condone their employment of one of the most egregious deviations from the text of Tolkien, namely the compressing of Sauron's rise to power, the forging of the rings, the fall of Numenor, and the War of the Last Alliance into a single point in time. Not content to flesh out and tell one of these stories well, no, instead, they must have it all, and to add hobbits on top of that to create their own mega-epic series. Their ultimate goal is to use Tolkien's world to invent their own Middle-earth story based upon their own wants and desires, and their own warped understanding of what makes something, quote, Tolkienian. It's clear to the showrunners the term Tolkienian means whatever they want it to mean, using it as a shield to ward off criticism of their many changes and to justify their many unnecessary creative liberties. That isn't to say that they couldn't invent stories within Tolkien's mythos, however. There are many opportunities to flesh out the lore of Middle-earth. In this matter, I agree wholeheartedly with the words of Tolkien scholar Tom Shippey, who was initially attached to the Rings of Power series as consultant but is not involved anymore. Back in a 2019 interview, Shippey was asked various questions about the Amazon Prime series and its setting in the Second Age. Shippey said, quote, "The Tolkien estate will insist that the main shape of the Second Age is not altered. Sauron invades Eriador, is forced back by a Númenórean expedition, and returns to Númenor. There, he corrupts the Númenóreans and seduces them to break the ban of the Valar. All this, the course of history, must remain the same, but you can add new characters and ask a lot of questions like, what has Sauron done in the meantime? Where was he after Morgoth was defeated? Theoretically, Amazon can answer these questions by inventing the answers, since Tolkien did not describe it. But it must not contradict anything which Tolkien did say. That's what Amazon has to watch out for. It must be canonical. it is impossible to change the boundaries which Tolkien has created. It is necessary to remain Tolkienian. And there it is. To be truly Tolkienian, a Middle-earth story must stay within the boundaries of what Tolkien wrote. It must fit within his lore. These are seen as limitations and restrictions for some apparently, but in reality, the only limit is your imagination. These are not limitations, these are opportunities to expand, to deepen Tolkien's rich mythos. Things definitely changed as the production continued, as we can see when we compare Shippey's statement with what we now know about Amazon's approach, making it abundantly clear that Amazon's Rings of Power series is not Tolkienian. But I'm curious to know what you think about what Amazon is doing with this supposed Middle-earth series. Do you think it's accurate to describe the Rings of Power as Tolkienian? Let me know your thoughts in the comment section below. I hope you enjoyed this video. Leave a like if you did, and be sure to subscribe for more Lord of the Rings and other sci-fi and fantasy news and lore. Thank you all so much for your support, and as always, have a very nerdy day.